Today is October 11th, 1996, by the way.
Is that right?
For our record.
Well, I'm 76 years old. Just turned October 3rd, didn't I? Okay.
78.
Let it be for the record.
78. Yeah.
What's that?
You're 78.
What did I say?
76.
Did I say 76? Good night. I can't even keep my own birthday straight, can I? I knew it was 78. Well, anyway, slip of the tongue. Well, anyway, let's see now. We're in Yuba City. Graduated from high school. Doyle had a girlfriend in Imperial Valley. This is not necessarily part of my history, but I've learned about it. His name is Eula May Ellis, and he thought the world of that girl. But all the time he was down there in the Imperial Valley in Calapat, he didn't have hardly any money for gas to get over to see her. She lived in Westmoreland. Well, he stayed down there for a time, but things got kind of rough, and I guess he decided to come up to Yuba City. He had a car, all right. He came to Yuba City. Stayed with with Dad and I. He stayed with me and Dad. And he stayed there for a while, and then he decided to go back to Imperial Valley. He had bought a car, a Touring. I think it was a Buick Touring in Yuba City. And he took that thing and went back. He didn't tell Dad he was leaving. So, I won't tell all the details, but he went back there, and I guess the girls what attracted him back to the Imperial Valley, the best Westmoreland. But that didn't work out so good. The Lord was overseeing his destiny, so it didn't work out. It wasn't meant to be for him to marry somebody down there. So he finally comes back to Yuba City a year or so later. And in those ensuing months, maybe a year or two, he got a hold of a mobile oil gas station, a mobile station. Right out there just as you leave Yuba City, right near the city there. And wasn't long before deacons would come over there and ask gathering fast offerings. So he'd give them a few shekels, out of the till. And of course Doyle had been away from the church so long that he forgot all about the church, but he knew there was such a church, but he didn't know anything about the foundation of it. He didn't forgot all about Joseph Smith, all of the stories about that. He didn't know it. That was gone. That was not even existent anymore. So time went on there, and he got rid of the mobile station, and he was out of work one winter, as I recall. And he had been reading books on philosophy. Schopenhauer was one of the philosophers that he was reading about. He thought that was very good. He's beginning to get interested in life and its meaning. Think about life itself in general, and its purpose and so forth. And one day he was home in Eildon Cook's place there where he was staying. We all stayed with Eildon Cook there in Yuba City after he came back from, well, not all the time, but part of the time there after we came back from Calapat. And Doyle leaned back and like that. I don't know whether he's on a couch or a chair, but he reached back and under a table. But he wasn't even seeing what he's got a hold of. And he grabbed a book like that. Opened it up. I guess it opened up right to the very first part where Joseph Smith was talking about where the Father and the Son, Jesus Christ, appeared to him. And Doyle says, when he read that, he says, no way, no way. And then he says, something said to him in his mind. He says, you don't know. You don't know. So he continued to read. The name of this book was 100 Years of Mormonism by John Henry Evans. And it covered a period from the birth of Joseph Smith, 1805, until 1905. 100 Years of Mormonism. And he painted, this author painted the ups and the downs of the opposition and the pros and the cons of the whole thing concerning the church and everything about it. Its doctrine, its inception, its origin. Joseph Smith, pros and the cons, everything said this about him and that about him, on both good and bad, I suppose. I didn't read it all, I read part of it. And in the process, he started to read the Book of Mormon. And he got, to make a long story short, the Lord blessed him with a testimony that was true. One of the most spectacular parts of his conversion was when they decided to ordain him an elder. At first they made him a teacher of the Book of Mormon class. But later on he was called and made an elder, to ordain him an elder. And of course that was in the Gridley stake, with Gridley as the headquarters of the Gridley stake. So he was contemplating getting this authority that it talks so much about in the restoration of teachings of the gospel. And he had a testimony, and he was very straight-laced, very strict. Oh, he wouldn't do anything wrong at all. He'd keep the Sabbath day holy. If he had to quit the job, he wouldn't accept the job if he had to work on Sunday. Some of those good brothers up there in Yuba City, they sheared sheep on Sunday. And it was considered a good job. If you didn't have one, you had to make money, you know. And some of them were elder members of the church. Boy, old Doyle, he was labeled with those people, I think, as a religious fanatic because he wouldn't work on Sunday. Well, anyway, he very serious and very, very devout, and anything he ever thought of it, he had ever done that was wrong, he repented of it, and sought the Lord very diligently, very diligently. So when it come to the time for him to be ordained an elder in the Melchizedek priesthood, he saw those people because he'd been up there to Gridley and seen those fellows, both in Yuba City and in Gridley. It didn't look like too much to him. He was hoping that he'd send out an apostle. Not an apostle, an apostle. And so when they got to Gridley, he was looking around there. He didn't see anybody out there from Salt Lake at all. But they took him in there where they met, the elders met. They seated him on the chair there and proceeded to ordain him an elder. And guess who was the mouth? You know him. He can use the English language pretty well. It's a good thing they asked him to do it.
Who's that?
Leif Rollins.
Oh.
And Leif was the mouthpiece when we ordained him. But that wasn't so important as the fact that as he was being ordained, he was enveloped in the power and the Spirit of God so unmistakably that he knew that he had received the priesthood of the Melchizedek priesthood on that occasion. He was filled, I suppose, with the Holy Ghost. There was a heavenly power that was so strong that he knew that he had received the priesthood, the authority, to act in the name of God, the Holy Melchizedek priesthood. And so that was something for him. That was very important. And of course God knew that he needed that, so that he supplied it. Now Doyle was in the process of, in his experience, the gift of the Holy Ghost is like when Joseph Smith explained to Oliver Cowdery about translating the Book of Mormon. And you see, Oliver Cowdery was given an opportunity temporarily to translate from the plates, the original plates of Mormon. And when he made the attempt, it didn't work. It didn't happen. And so in the revelation that the Lord gave to Joseph Smith explaining why Oliver Cowdery was not successful in attempting to translate from the plates, the Lord explained that he says that when you must look on what you're translating, and study it out in your heart and in your mind. Study it out. You have to do a little studying here. And when you arrive at the proper thing, I will cause your bosom to burn within you, so that you will feel and know that it is right. That which you're translating, the part that you were thinking of, the way you were translating at that moment. But if you do not have the right idea in mind, you'll have a stupor of thought. But the part where he said, if you have the right idea or the right translation coming into your mind, I will cause your bosom to burn within you. A burning, a real burning. Not a bad burning, but a heavenly burning. Doyle, of course, his experience with the gift of the Holy Ghost was like that. Whenever anything came into his mind, I suppose he got it when he was reading the Book of Mormon. Whenever anything came into his mind and the Holy Ghost caused that burning to come in there strong into his body, then he knew that's what he should do, or that which was right. If it was something he was supposed to do, it would let him know that is what he was supposed to do. Okay? Mm-hmm. And so he had that training, and after I got out of high school, 1937, at first I got a job working for the Yuba Sutter Laundry. The same laundry that your mother got a job with when she came out here much later. And the secretary of the high school had recommended me for the job. Whether I was qualified or not, he recommended me. Well, anyway, in the book you see, in the first year I took mechanical arts in high school. I thought it was easy. I thought I could do it easy. The second year I changed over to commercial subjects. So I studied bookkeeping and typing, etc. The third year and the fourth year I took academic subjects. And I did quite well in them. But anyway, I could tell more about that, but I won't say any more about that. Doyle, I went, after I got out of hospital, I went over to the Southern Pacific Railroad in Marysville, where they unload freight. They were unloading freight cars, all sorts of merchandise, going to the merchants in the several communities and cities. And these were taken out of freight cars and loaded into different trucks that would go to different areas, or surrounding areas. And I applied for that job. Cook or somebody told me to go over there. They were hiring me. So I went over there one day and I signed my name to try to get a job over there. There was no application. They just took your name and your phone number. Well, it went on for a little while there, and I don't remember how long it was. It seemed like quite a while, but maybe it wasn't too bad, too much. And then when they called for me, I told Doyle to take the job. And he did, because he wasn't working. Well, that's what started him up in the freight business. Later on, the general trucking and the moving and storage business. That's the beginning of it right there. And I'll tell you how it happened. He went over there and took that job, and he worked there for some time. And of course, in the meantime, here's my dad. Here comes Sharp back into the picture. Here's the next time. This is the third time. 1, 2, 3. This is the third time that Sharp is in getting Dad back into the farming, into back on his own feet where he could do something. Dad got wind from Sharp. I guess Dad must have corresponded with Sharp if he could get him something to do so. I don't know what he did, but he might have done that. Anyway, Sharp put him in touch with the Stewart brothers in Salt Lake City. They were fairly prosperous merchants there, and I think they had sold coal and whatever else they did, I don't know, but they were pretty influential people and successful. And they had this great big 1,000-acre ranch up in Mackay, Idaho, just out of Mackay, about 3 miles north of Mackay, Idaho. Now, Mackay, Idaho is situated, Arca was almost right in the middle of Idaho, and Mackay was about 60 or 70 miles north of that, whatever it is, 50 or 60 miles. Well, he got that deal lined up and sealed and signed and delivered to be delivered to him, and Dad and I went up there in his Model A Ford in about October. That'd be 39. Yeah, 1939. It was the fall of 1939 we went up there, about October, as I remember. Maybe it was a little earlier. This place was situated, as you came out of Mackay, you went out a ways, and then you came out, made a rounding, and then you look down here, and there's a great big reservoir of water. And you go up past that, and then you turn right and go up a slope, a gradual slope, about 2 or 3 miles up to the head, nearly to the head of a canyon, which wasn't a very high mountain, but it was sort of mountainous there, where there's water came down through there into that they used to irrigate with. And we went up this little old road, and it was a dirt road, and it wasn't any good at all. The road was a poor one that led up off of the main road to this where the house was and the barns and everything else. And it was outfitted with cattle and sheep. I forgot the number now. Let's see. I don't remember how many there was, but there was quite a lot. There was quite a herd of cattle and sheep on the place. And this was 1,000 acres. As we rode up this road, I want you to notice this now. And when we got up to the part where they irrigated and grew alfalfa on, I could see all these rocks out there on the road. And my nature is whenever I saw pictures of farms, I see a nice little plot, a square plot here growing with nice green stuff here, and another plot over here with nice things growing over there, all lined up beautifully on a flat level. And here I see all these rocks, and it looks more like a wilderness to me. They could grow alfalfa and do all right on it, but I just didn't like that at all. It never appealed to me at all, that part of it. And anyway, we got situated, and had a house. We lived in this place, and come winter time, I got up in the middle of the night and felt inspired to write Doyle a letter. And he'd come up there. I don't remember all what I said in that letter, but I sort of felt inspired to do it. And darn if he didn't come up. He came up, he and Faye. Faye was married by this time, and I've left that part out. They'll have to give that history themselves. So that coming, they had put the bucks in to the sheep too early, and they started lambing out, having their little lambs in February. Too early, cold country up there. That's much colder. They should have come out. They should have lambed out more later on in the spring, early summer. Anyway, we helped on that. We had to get up. Doyle would take his turn for a couple of hours and watch them, and then I would take a turn, Dad would take a turn through the night. It was cold. Those sheep would have their little lambs, out there, and leave them right out there in the middle of the snow, laying right in the snow, the dumb buddies. And they had a shed and straw in there that they could have gone in underneath the shed. No, they walked right on out there in the middle of everywhere and have their little lambs. So we had to go down there and watch after them and see that they got a suck of milk. If they could get that little old lamb over there to the mother and get them up to the udder where they could suck and get a couple of gulps of that in their little body, they'd survive. So we were told, at least. So that happened, and that's just one little experience. But anyway, later on that spring, Dad and Doral had a little difference there of something, which I guess showed Doral that Dad, he wanted to have the full say, and I don't know, Doyle didn't particularly like that, I guess. Anyway, and the Spirit of the Lord was working on Doyle. But anyway, we were slated to go back anyway to California. That was in the cards anyway. From up above. Okay? So, anyway, Doyle, the Lord, I guess Doyle and Faye prayed about it, and they both were manifested by the Holy Ghost, this burning. But managed to go back to California. Okay? So, you know what happened? Dad must have called Sharp, and lo and behold, Heber Sharp and one of the Stewart brothers came right up there to try to persuade Doyle to stay. And they talked with him quite a while, like Dutch uncles, you know. They tried to get him. They said, I'll outfit you, I'll back you up, I'll outfit with you with thoroughbreds. And it went into all of that. If you'll stay here. Your dad would not have got this place if it hadn't been for you boys. That was what they said. Okay? So, Doyle finally told him in the final analysis that the Lord had commanded him to leave. I can't stay here. I've been commanded by God to leave and go back to California. And Sharp then said, well, then my mouth is closed from now on. And they gave up. Okay? Now, I'm already calibrated to leave that place because I don't like the joint too much anyway. All right. Come spring, Doyle's commanded to leave. We had this little old Ford that Doyle pulled a little trailer, house trailer that their folks had given to them as a marriage present. It wasn't a very large trailer, but it was, you could get in there and sleep and so forth, you know. Anyway, we hooked onto that, and the little old Ford that they pulled it with, it had a 1939 license plate on it, California license. And this was the next year. Okay, this was 1940 when we left there. Okay, and we pulled into California with a 1939 license plate. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself here. Anyway, we pulled down. Dad gave us Doyle a certain amount of money. I don't remember exactly how much he gave him, but I guess it was all he could spare, so he could get us on our way to California. We went in. We drove right on down to Salt Lake City because it was right at the time of June conference, MIA conference. You've heard of those. Mm-hmm. And Dad or Faye went to the June conference, and I don't think I did, but they did. I don't remember being there. And I met Dad up there. Dad came down there, I guess, and he gave me $30. I guess I must have been at Aunt Hilma's place, because that's Dad's sister. Aunt Hilma, and she had a daughter and two sons that were our cousins. And we went there a lot of times when we went to Salt Lake. We always wound up at Aunt Annie's place. Isn't that something? Because they were, in those days, you know, if you came there, you were invited in like one of the family. It was just an accepted way to do it in those days. Today we wouldn't want to just go barge in on somebody, but we barged in on her plenty of times, if you could use the word. And anyway, Dad gave me this $30, and Dad went back up to Mackey. I forgot to tell you that before we left that spring, Isla and Cook came up there in their family. So Dad was not alone. That was good. Dad must have sent for him, by golly, you know, Cook, he was probably happy to go. He loved that place up there. He felt real good about, you know, not having to slave like he had to do working for a living, you know, like in those days they were doing. And so he thought that was like a paradise. Doyle did too. Doyle said he loved that place. He said, I love that place.
You talking about that ranch?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had no affection at all for it. So here we come down to June conference. And he had that little old Model A Ford. I believe it was a Roadster. I've forgotten now, but I think it was a Roadster. Anyway, they went to June conference. Dad finally came down. He gave me $30. After June conference, we left on our way to California. Okay, Highway 40. That you could call it 40 in those days. And we came out to Grantsville. In those days, the road didn't go straight through after you get to the end of around the end of the mountain. It didn't go straight through there. It went rattling ways out around like that. Went right through Grantsville. You know where Grantsville is?
Mm-mm.
You know where that smelter is? You get
Oh,
out
yeah,
right?
right.
Well, it's around
Yeah.
that way, and down in that valley is where Grantsville is.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go up the other way, that's I can't call the name of it
Yeah.
now.
Know what you mean.
But anyway, when we got to Grantsville, the axle broke on the trailer. No good. So we stopped. And Grantsville is not. This is a wide place from the road, you know. We went and asked one of the service stations there. I must have gassed up. There's no anybody that we could get this fixed, this axle. I said, well, I think there's a junk place right out here, a little ways out of town, and if you'll go down there and along a little lane and go in there, and you might be able to fix you up. And we did. We went down there, and he went out and looked amongst all his stuff, and he found an axle that was just the dope for us. But he put it on. They put it on there, and fitted it on up good. Cost $30. Dad came all the way down there to give us $30, and that did it. When we arrived in Yuba City, I think Doyle said he had 95 cents in his pocket. He gave me half. He gave me 50 cents to get 45. That's all we had. And when Doyle previously, before we ever went up there to Idaho, any of us, Doyle had been made the stake mission president, and he had, no, wait a minute, am I getting ahead of myself here?
You got married first. You gonna tell us the story about you and Faye and Doyle?
No, I wasn't going to mention that right now. But I hadn't thought of it, in other words, right now. But I was trying to figure out whether it was before we went up there or not. It must have been after he came back that he was made the mission president, stake mission president. And of course, I went up. He didn't want to barge in on Faye's folks to live with them and sponge off of them. We only had 45 cents. But Faye's father and mother, he insisted, Guy Hill is his name, he insisted that Doyle come over there and be with them. Because they was over there on the river, and where all these rocks are on the river where they used to dredge, by the Feather River. They were over there and had a big old wooden contraption made out of steel and wood that they shoveled the gravel in there, and the rocks and the gravel, and the gold came out and down into there and settled in there. And old Doyle, he went down there and he stayed with them and shoveled rock and shoveled gravel there. Stayed with them, I don't know how long, a couple of weeks.
They dredged gold, that's what they did for a living?
Well, that's what they were doing at this time.
Oh.
It was sort of a change of pace. And it was just a ticket for Doyle because he helped work and it was a job. He helped bring in the gold. And they made pretty good with the gold. This old Doyle was quite surprised. But before he did that, he went back to the job he had unloading freight from the freight cars into the trucks. The job I applied for, okay, he got the job back, but he didn't get it immediately. He went there and told him where he'd get his mail. He told him he'd get his mail up by Biggs, where fairly close to where they were dredging or getting the gold out of that area. Well, anyway, he finally got a letter and was called back to work. God had provided the whole thing for him, set it all up, this gold edging experience, fixed up Doyle perfectly and Faye, because he wouldn't want to stayed with them right in their house and sponged off of them at all. And you see that little side trip was just a ticket. Well, anyway, they called him back, and so they moved their little trailer back to Marysville. They situated it, as I remember, out there right next to that graveyard, and I thought that was a real strange place for them to park that thing. But anyway, that's where they were. And I went up. Oh, I guess I was right about that. I had been up to Grass Valley before that. And I stayed at Bishop Thomas L. Carter. Doyle sent me up there. He was the mission president. So I had been up there before I went to Idaho, I guess.
Were you a stake missionary or what?
Yeah, I was he made me. Yeah, I was a stake missionary, sure.
Oh, okay.
Doyle, he plugged that good. He plugged that stake missionary work real good and got people in there. He really worked with stake presidents. He got stake missionaries. Get this work done. He did. And I was one of them. He sent me up to Grass Valley. This was before I went to Idaho. And I went up to stay at Bishop Thomas L. Carter's in Grass Valley. And I stayed there, I suppose, and I'd sort of forgotten the sequence of this, but I stayed there until Dad decided to go up to Idaho to get this 1,000-acre ranch. See? Mm-hmm. Doyle already had been a mission president. Well, anyway, when we came back, he got the job back at Southern Pacific. They call it PMT, Pacific Motor Transport. Well, he worked there for a while. I mean, kept on working there. And he wasn't making big wages, but it was enough to get by it. In the meantime, here I asked him, I guess it was that fall of 1940, I asked him if he would support me on a mission. In those days, they only sent about $30 a month. So he said he would. He acquiesced to it, and rather, I guess he did it willingly, but at the same time, he probably thought it wouldn't be too easy. But he thought, well, a sacrifice is worth the sacrifice to do the right Lord work, and the Lord would bless him. I guess the Lord must have confirmed that in that manner. And the Lord did bless him marvelously. He did. Well, there were times that they missed the payment back, but everything worked out right. Because I was working in the country, and I won't go into that now. But some of the time I was sent down in the country.
Didn't need a lot of
where your mother lived, and sometimes I got along okay. The Lord took care of the whole thing. I wasn't worried about it. It's a funny thing. When I was on a mission, I didn't worry about nothing. Anything, I should say. I didn't worry about anything. And so he sent me up there, and about that time I was still down in the Gridley. Grass Valley was part of the Gridley Stake, so I was down back and forth into the Gridley Stake headquarters in Gridley. And I went in and saw President John C. Todd of the stake. Talked about going on a mission. He said, well, you kind of thought it was a little bit doubtful. I didn't think you could go now. It's just a little bit late to get to do that. And it's a funny thing. He didn't carry that through.
It was what do you mean a little bit late?
Because of the draft.
Oh.
They were drafting in a boy my age. I was ready to go into the Army or the Navy or somewhere. So why did he just let it drop there? Why didn't he know? Well, he didn't say anything about it after that. But pretty soon, here comes Sylvester Q. Cannon from the 12 Apostles. I think was an assistant to the Quorum of the 12 Apostles out to the Gridley Stake. The Spirit of the Lord went on my mind, see? Go over to see him. I went right into the stake presidency's office where they held their high council meetings. And there he was. Why, of course you can go on a mission.
Oh, you asked him?
Sure. I was prompted to do that. So I went in and asked him about it, and of course, sure. If you get the call before your draft number comes up, sure. You go on a mission. I'd already been signed up and all that stuff, yes. But my number hadn't come up. So, boy, it wasn't long before I got a call. That was, I guess it must have been sort of in the wintertime or the spring of 1941. Just before 1941, or maybe at 1941 I'd already started coming into that year. Well, anyway, so I prepared to go on a mission, and I was going from the Grass Valley Ward, and I was staying with Bishop Thomas L. Carter and his wife, Katie Carter. They had a nice, beautiful little family, little children. He'd been married before, lost his first wife. And I was perfectly made welcome there, and Doyle had arranged all of that. Very nice. Their hearts and their was open. They were just as nice as can be. In fact, the matter is, in our own ward right here in West Sacramento, one of those little girls that I met up there, his kids, lives right in our ward right today.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. They were little kids. Now, the youngest one, I helped her take her first step. And then she, and then came little one that's here. I think of her name. Ruth Putnam is her name now. Little Ruthie, I called her. And then little Clara. And the other was Alice. Then they got two older sisters from the previous marriage, too. Well, anyway, we waited, and I got my call. Everything was made, arrangements were made. And I was to report in Salt Lake City at the mission home in the first part of April, 1941. So you see, our coming back to California was not, when we look at what happened afterwards, was not just an accident. If we'd have stayed up in Idaho, I probably never gone on a mission. It wouldn't have worked out that way at all. But it was necessary that I go and meet my future wife, which I had no idea was going to happen, of course. But lo and behold, I hitchhiked from Yuba City and Marysville right up to Salt Lake City. I remember getting some rides. I got up in the mountains up there, finally out of Auburn. I had them pacing up and down, throwing rocks out there, and waiting for my next ride. And pretty soon I got a ride, and I got a ride right into, well, first I got a ride, no, that's later. I got a ride right into Reno. And he let me out right in the middle of town, where you look up this other way. Here's the highway, and you look up this way, this little sign, the biggest little city in the world. I was right in the center of town, and I was standing right on the street corner, right here, right across the street where I went. And I was hailing them. You know, when I hailed people, they knew they were hailed.
Just to get your thumb?
I used to stand up and go like this. Will that show it? I used to stand up like this, go. But anyway, I wasn't standing there very long, and a man pulled up, opened the door, I got in, and he took me out about 3 miles out, what they call Sparks, that's right, adjoining Reno. And he was a member of the church. And it was getting evening time anyway, and he took me right to his house. And I told him I was going on a mission reporting to Salt Lake City. And I stayed, we ate supper with him that night, and that night I stayed overnight with him. Next morning he took me out to the highway, and I got on my way again. Well, we won't go into detail about the other rides, but I got out there on the crossroads. One road went to Fallon, and the other one north up to Lovelock and Winnemucca. Boy, I got a ride then, and I got a ride all the way into Wells. And I no sooner got let out in Wells, and I walked across the street, and a guy come along in a Model A Ford sedan, picked me up, and took me right into Salt Lake City and let me out right in front of Aunt Annie's house, my dad's sister.
Mm-hmm.
And it was getting it was getting pretty late. I don't remember what time it was. It was getting pretty late. And the landlady came to the door and let me in. And I stayed there, of course, until I went to the mission home a day or two later. But Dad also came down and gave me money to buy a new suit at that time. He knew I was there. And there was, when I got into the mission home, all this time of hitchhiking and all that, all my possessions, I had it in a little small suitcase about this long, about that thick and about this high. Okay, a very small little suitcase. Had all my belongings that I took with me for clothes and what have you. And when I got up near the mission home, here I am walking in to the mission home right simultaneously to Samuel Bringhurst and his son Samuel Bringhurst. One was Samuel E. Bringhurst, and I think the other one was Samuel C. Bringhurst. Very fine looking outfitted father and a very finely outfitted young man, new suit, nice vest, nice stair-step suitcases, the finest that you could probably buy. And I couldn't help but notice the difference between my circumstances and his.
Going to the same mission?
Yes.
Oh.
We went right in together, and when they made our assignments, we were assigned to the very same mission, Central States Mission. We rode on the train to Independence, Missouri, and that evening we went around there and they showed us the place where the temple site was and a few other things, the Josephites and the Hedrickites and the otherites, whatever they were. And they put us on a train that evening, both I and Elder, what did I say? Bringhurst. And we came right on down that night into Tulsa, Oklahoma, heading right down for Neshoba, if you understand the direction there I'm talking about, in that direction. Elder Weldy was the district president. He was out on the platform as the train pulled up, and we saw him as we went by there. We got out there, and he took us over to the little chapel on 1301 South Quincy Street in Tulsa. He had a little Model A Ford sedan, just like my dad had. And he took me as his companion, and Elder Bringhurst went with other elder there, Elder DeGraff. Well, we stayed there in Tulsa, and we did some contacting, evening meetings, and tracting, and so forth, but that was in the first part of April, but in the first part of May, the district president, Elder Walter B. Welty, decided to take a little trip down into the south part of the state and catch these little communities where they had baptized people that were members and go to each community where there were members, and we'd stay at each place. Maybe hold a meeting if we could, or at least meet up with the Latter-day Saints that was in the church. And we'd been to several, and then the last place we was going to come to, we turned kind of around back north into what they call the Kiamichi Mountains. They weren't very big mountains, but they were mountains. They called them mountains. And we wound up in this little place called Neshoba, where Edgar Hendricks and Pearl Hendricks lived with their family, Henrietta, Thelma, and Ed. I should say Ed, Thelma, in the right rotation. Thelma's the youngest. And of course we stayed there overnight, and the next day we went around telling them we was going to have a meeting in their schoolhouse the next following night, and we preached in their schoolhouse that night. And lo and behold, I wasn't too experienced about preaching anywhere. But I preached on pre-existence, believe it or not.
I knew a lot about that.
I guess that was the one subject that attracted me the most. But anyway, we stayed overnight at the Hendricks place. I met her husband and family. And Edgar Hendricks was a very fine, good man, but he had joined the church long before he met Pearl. He had been married before, and even had children for a previous marriage. But he was paralyzed, and you'd say, I guess, poor health. And Pearl had to do almost everything for him. And there were times when I came and visited there before he passed away, and I'd read out of some tracts and pamphlets. And he tried to respond by saying something, but he couldn't get it out of his thought process wouldn't coordinate too good. He couldn't very well speak out his mind. But he was a good man, and he'd kind of got away from activity at the church. But I guess anybody that lived out in that country would get out of activity from the church, you know, because there wasn't any churches out in that area. Mm-hmm. He would have to go few and far between. And if they was, they would be just a little small branch. So what we did, we were directed by the district president, we were sent down there, on Elder Shumway at first, to use Sister and Brother Hendricks' place as headquarters. And we would go down and around the other communities away from there, miles and miles away, during the week. Now, Antlers was the largest community near there, about 20 miles away. We go to Antlers and we go down to another little old community where they had a schoolhouse, and we walk and keep walking. The next day, we stay overnight at somebody there. They were non-members we stayed with, incidentally. They were all hospitable, practically all of them. And we went to many of them, but we usually come back. In fact, we almost always come back on weekends, on Saturday. They stay at the showboat at Hendricks' place, okay? So, this went on for a number of weeks, and so 1 week during that summer, for 2 weeks, we stayed out for 2 weeks on time. And when we came back, Edgar Hendricks, the father, or the husband, had passed away. And
how did you know they were members? How'd you find out the Hendricks were members of the church?
Well, they had records in the headquarters of the church. They keep records.
Okay, so he was the only member there, but
well, Edna White and her family was members. Okay. Edna White was a member. Okay. Okay. And they lived right close by there to the Hendricks. And of course, the records of the church, they knew all about the ones out there that had been baptized over the years. So when we come back, Pearl told us that they had had the funeral and it was all over with, and had been buried. She had called Tulsa to get hold of the district president, but nobody answered. She didn't know where we were, so they went ahead and had the funeral. So that's the way that happened. So they kept leaving me down there. Well, Elder Shumway, he got a little bit, I don't know whether he made the excuse of his health or something. I can't remember now. And we went back to Tulsa. And lo and behold, they sent me down there all over again. This is the third time now, this time with Elder Evanson. Okay? And Elder Evanson were companions. And they kept leaving us down there. Leaving us down there. Just kept on going on up into the fall. But into November, as I remember the account, it was in November. Well, by this time, I had made a few notations in my little journal, which is right up there. I had made a notation in this little journal, a little small journal I had, after we visited the Hendricks. I said, Sister Hendricks is one of the most sweetest and most devout Latter-day Saints I've ever met. Okay? And I made a comment like that maybe twice, maybe 3 times in my little book. I mentioned what a sweet person that she was, one of the sweetest that I'd ever met, or something like that. So as time went on, I began to have feelings toward Sister Hendricks. Felt quite strongly toward her. I admired her very much. And finally it got pretty strong, and we got into Antlers one day, I and my companion, and I went into a restaurant, a cafe there, and I wrote her a letter. And proposed marriage.
Right on the spot, huh?
Right there, yeah. Laid it right out on there. Yes, you bet I did. Well, anyway, we must remember this, that we don't do all these things by our own devices and knowledge and wisdom. The Spirit of the Lord was undoubtedly guiding me on this occasion. Well, we went back, and after she got the letter, and of course she did not reject my proposal.
She must have liked you too.
Well, she liked all the missionaries, really. She did.
But that was,
of course, that'd give her time
that was
to
kind of
think.
funny that, you know.
But but it seems to me like at one time she did voice the idea that that was among her dreams, that eventually she would meet some person, you know, and would be able to get married and so forth, and perhaps have a large family, you know, be sealed in the temple. You know, I think that had occurred to her mind.
So, you know, you hadn't really had a courtship.
Not really, just what contact we had there. But then we were called in finally to Tulsa. But I had told Pearl Hendricks that I was going to come down and see them at Christmas time, which wasn't too awful far away. A month and a half or two, whatever it was. And so I promised I was going to come back to see her at Christmas time. So we left the little lane. There was a little lane coming out like this. There's a house up here, and this little higher ground up here. Little lane leading down to the road, led out of town. Dirt road here. We bid them goodbye. We got out to this little road, and we started walking down this road. Just barely started. And it flashed in my mind, Elder Toronto will accompany me down here at Christmas time when I come down, like I had promised. Well, it went through my mind. And you know, when these things are rather new to you, when these flashes come to your mind, you don't always think of them too strongly. But it's sufficiently strong that you do not forget. That which the Spirit of God puts into your mind, you don't forget. I did not forget. Otherwise, I probably would have forgotten if it hadn't been for the Spirit of the Lord. Well, we went down that little road. We got into McAllister. I had previously been stationed in McAllister for a while. At least I'd been there for a while. And so we went that day. We got into McAllister, which wasn't so terribly far away. And then that next day we rode on a train on into Tulsa, which was further north. So that next day, I guess it was, we had a missionary meeting, and all the missionaries were there. They had been called in from here and there and everywhere. There were different missionaries working different places. Some of them were out in the country the same as we were. Some of them were visiting in different localities. And we were all in the little chapel in Tulsa there. And they began to assign the elders their different places on the station where they were to work. And when it come to me, Elder Toronto was assigned to be my companion, which of course I had to. That was not me. The Lord's supposed to be directing His church, not us. Okay, He's doing the directing here. All right. So there was 4 of us elders that was assigned to go and work in Okemah. Okemah was a little bit south and mostly west of Tulsa, about 35, 40 miles, something like that. And so the names of these 4 elders was me. Well, let's go back the other way. Elder Lamro from Hurricane, Utah. Elder Munro, M-U-N-R-O, from Soda Springs, Idaho. Elder Toronto from Salt Lake City. And me, Elder Sorenson, from wherever I came from. All points west. Now, so we get down into Tulsa and we're working, and we get into this landlady's house. Her name is we call her Mrs. Huddleston. She had a big house, and upstairs, plenty of room. Had kitchen privileges downstairs. We had a bedroom and a bathroom upstairs and so forth, big bedroom. So, Elder Toronto worked with me tracting, and Elder Monroe and Elder Lamro worked in their tracting. So, one day I and Elder Toronto was uptown there in the main drag going through town, which is Route 66, went right through the middle of it. We saw a man making a deep beeline for us. And when he got over to us, he was coming catty-corner across the street. He recognized, no doubt, as missionaries, and so he came over to meet us. He introduced himself as his name was Bill Martin, and he lived out in the country, a little west of Okemah, and then we had to turn north to get into this little place where he lived called Macabre, where they had a schoolhouse. And so he invited us, and he suggested that we come out there, maybe we could preach in the schoolhouse and, do missionary like that. So the first opportunity on a weekend, we decided to go there. You betcha live. So we went out there, and the first time, of course, we got there, we didn't hold any meetings, but I guess it was the next time we did. Then we preached in their schoolhouse. I don't remember when we preached in there, twice or once. Seemed like it was twice. And we had been out there a number of times to Macabre, visiting Bill Martin and his wife, and so forth, family. So, one of these trips, now this is interesting to note this, on one of these little walkings, we sometimes had to walk quite a ways. That dirt road that went out from the main Highway 66. And I developed a little blister right down there underneath my shoelace. A little tiny red spot. All it was. It wasn't even a blister, it was just a little red spot. And so in a day or so, that thing swelled up there so bad I couldn't get my shoe on. It was like a boil. So one morning I was sitting in the front room, and Mrs. Huddleston, the landlady, was going to put a poultice on it. So I had my shoe off, and she was wrapping my thing, was getting ready to do that, and fix it up, and had my foot out like this, She was sitting there in front of me. And a ring came at the back door. A knock, rather, not a ring, but a knock came at the back door. Here we are in the front room. If I'm sitting over there and this is the front room, she'd have to go out this way, down that way through a little hall, into the kitchen, and the kitchen is pretty good size, into the back door of the kitchen, into a back porch, which is pretty good size, and a door back in the back porch further yet. So I just sit there nonchalantly, waiting for her to come back, and just sit there, And lo and behold, I overheard her say that she had a car out in the garage. The old Hudson.
The old Hudson.
The old Hudson. A car out in the garage.
Mm-hmm.
And we had seen her garage. It was separate from the house, all enclosed in. The doors were all shut in front. The side door was shut. You couldn't tell she had a car at all. So when she came back in there, I said, "What? You got a car out there in the garage?" So I hopped out there on one foot and looked at it. Came back. I says, "I think I got a buyer for you." I was planning to send Pearl Hendricks and the children out to Yuba City, California, until I got finished with this mission, which would be approximately 14 months after they got out here.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
The 2-year mission?
Yeah. I had 14 months to go when she came out here. Well, I want to mention at this time that I do not believe I would have heard what she said and known what she said if it hadn't have been that the Spirit of the Lord had quickened my ears to hear that. I do not believe that. I think that God's caused, the Spirit of God caused me to hear that much, that my ears or something was quickened, so that I heard that conversation, or at least a part of it, just that much. So when I got back in, I arranged in due time to take it with me. I was planning to come down here at Christmas time like I promised. The Lord gave me the car to go with. See, He already fixed that up. Of course, I didn't know that too well at the time, but I was going along with the program pretty well. Well, you know, one day I and Elder Lamro, he had a flu or something, and we stayed in the house, and it was in the wintertime, while the other two elders, the junior companions, went out and tracked him. We stayed inside. And when I had first come into the mission home there, or mission there in Tulsa, just about a month later or whatever it was, I had witnessed the baptism of a very fine-looking young lady. She had blonde hair, very nice convert from the church. And Elder Lamro, I think he had baptized her, and he was planning her to be his wife. Okay.
The plot thickens.
Now listen to this. So the day when we was in, and he was sick that day, he told me about her. Well, I was there. I saw him baptize her. Mm-hmm. I was there. Mm-hmm. And then I told him about Pearl. And we both kind of had something in common there.
Confided.
In other words, we sort of rejoiced together, if you want to know the facts. All right. So, I finally wrote the district president a letter. And by this time, Elder Welty had gone home that previous summer, and Elder D. Graff was the district president. And I wrote him a letter asking for permission to go down to Neshoba at Christmas time so I could see Pearl and the family, kids. Okay? He didn't answer my letter until just about a week before Christmas. He waited and he waited and waited. He called the mission president and everything else. I won't go for that. Forget that. All right. You can imagine what happened there. Mm-hmm. You can use your imagination. Anybody's got enough imagination for it. Well, anyway, he finally wrote me a letter about a week before Christmas. His district president, D. Graff. And said, well, Elder Sorenson, you better come in and spend Christmas with the elders and lady missionaries. So, the afternoon of Christmas Eve coming up, he got in the big old Hudson, and I drove him into Tulsa. And that night, I let Elder Lamro take that car to see his sweetheart. That family. District president, they knew about that. Don't ever kid yourself about that. Mm-hmm. They knew about his contact there. I think he'd probably got permission his own self. I don't know. He didn't tell me that, but apparently he did. Maybe he did, and I forgot about it. But at any rate, that day, or it was either that day or well, it was probably Christmas Day, or some say it was the next day, but I don't remember. It was anyway. It was either the next day after that night we got there, or the next day. Elder de Graaf called me in the little cloakroom he had to use for an office, and to talk about my request. And in the conclusion of this little conversation, he granted permission for me to go down there to see Pearl and the temple. He said it was all right. Then he said this: who do you want to go with you? That's key, you know. I said, well, Elder Toronto, he's sitting out there on the front steps of the church. He's my companion, and he wants to go. So we got out there, and we took off. Now, we arrived there about 6, 7 o'clock. They had, they'd been used to the Christmas nuts and candy and whatever they had, and the kids were there, and we stayed there. Well, anyway, in an ensuing day or two after that, I think we stayed there until January the 3rd. But anyway, during this period of time, Pearl, I don't think had $100. She went into Tulsa, not Tulsa, but Antlers rather, and she came back with $100. I don't know who she got it from. I don't even remember asking her where she got the money. But so when we left, after we had a visit with her and stayed there for several days, I took the Hudson and the $100 back with me to Okima. But I told her, I said to her, try to sell the place, try to get as much money out of it as you can. And let me know. And I'll write Doyle and I'll tell him you're coming out, and then I'll come down and I'll load you in the car and get you started on the way to California. Do you know something? She had that place sold before the month was up. Your mother did. You didn't get a lot of money for it, but she sold it. That land back in that country, I guess maybe it wasn't too high priced anyway, I don't know. But I was inexperienced in that field, and I couldn't deal in that field anyway. I couldn't even advise her. So she wrote me a letter. Told me she sold the place. I don't remember whether I wrote a letter back or not, but anyway, I went down and loaded the stuff in the car, in the old Hudson. Brought her back to Okima. Mrs. Huddleston gave me a place to sleep that night. She was right there. I got a picture of it, standing right out in front of her house, and she's with us, Mrs. Huddleston. Pearl, the 3 kids, and me, and Mrs. Huddleston. I got that little picture. And I'd like to get that in large if I could. Put it in something. Just a little snapshot. Well, anyway, the next day, we got her a driver's license, and we got her on our way to California. And that was quite a trip for her because she hadn't been used to driving.
Driver's license.
She hadn't been driving much. But the providence of God brought her out here. If God is behind something, it'll be all right. And he was behind that. Now, I've only told you a part of that part. The most spectacular part is where I just left her after I was working down in that locality where she lived, in the Shoba. When I left that residence, down the little lane, hit that little dirt road, and it was presented in my mind. Elder Toronto will accompany me down there at Christmas. Prophet Joseph Smith said that when you have these experiences as Latter-day Saints, and when you have sudden ideas come into your mind, suddenly, you will find that that which is presented to your mind by the Spirit of God will come to pass either that day or soon. Well, it came to pass. I didn't make it happen. I didn't even know where I was going on a mission. I didn't make that happen either. I didn't do any of that prepared the way for me to go on this mission. Coming back to California from Mackay, Idaho was a part of that program. And the fact that Doyle was willing to support me on the mission was a sacrifice on his part in that sense. And because of his willingness to do it and his devotion to the cause of God, the Lord prospered him marvelously. And I'll tell you how he did it. The very fact that I applied for that job at the freight company, Southern Pacific PMT, after I got out of high school, which job he took, which he finally left and went to Idaho, and then finally came back to the same job, and he got it back again. When he got that job back again, he finally got an opportunity even though he was a religious fanatic and the cards were against him because there was workers around there. Those other guys were rough guys. They spoke roughly. They weren't religious at all. And they thought he was a kind of a different sort of a guy, you know. Maybe a religious fanatic. Well, they didn't know what to think of him, I guess. But an opportunity came up for Doyle to be a helper on a guy that took the trip or the load to Oroville. They delivered our freight up in Oroville. Well, he got the job. Only Providence could have made it happen. Okay? Then it went on a little bit later. I don't know how long it took. He finally got an opportunity. Well, that I should have mentioned this, that when he got the opportunity to be a helper on that run to Oroville, the helper had to go get the truck, double header, a trailer behind another one, and bring it over there from another locality in Marysville and spot it and back it in to the dock, which he had never done before. And when he got over there, boy, they all was watching then. They thought he was going to screw up, as the saying is. That's a word I usually don't use, but that's what is kind of common use today. Thought he was going to really foul up backing that in there. And he spotted that thing in there slipping and whistling. He put her right in there. So he got that job as a helper. But that paved the way for later on when he got a truck of his own to drive independently, delivering freight for PMT. So time went on, and driving for PMT, delivering freight, some kind of a squabble came up. He worked himself up to head driver. He was the head driver. He was kind of like a boss. The Lord blessed him, elevated him just like it did Joseph in Egypt, to be the head driver. And after a while, there was somebody that was supposed to be some little thing, a trunk or something, picked up from some private residence, and something happened that he couldn't be picked up, whether the woman wasn't there or whether it was, or something happened, and he was blamed for something that he wasn't to blame for. And they called the guy from Sacramento to Marysville to talk about it and investigate it. And he talked to Doyle about it, okay? And Doyle, he would not acquiesce. He was not in the blame. And he wasn't going to budge for nobody. Okay? You know what happened? He quit. He quit PMT. Guess what he did? To show you how the Lord blessed him. He went across the river, just across the river, the Yuba City, into the Gene Morrison's cherry, what do they call it, maraschino cherry plant, where they mixed up cherries for, you know, how they put them and can them up and so forth. Is it all right?
Yeah.
And he walked right over there. He had these leather chaps on, an apron. Leathers covered all the way down here like that, all up the front, just like an apron, let me down a leather. He walked in there and he slapped his hand on the table like that, he said. And Gene, he says, you haven't got a job for a good man, have you? Oh, what's up, young? What's up? You know, Sorenson. What happened? And he told him, I guess, what happened. And Gene Morrison had the contract, the trucks, in his hands to give to whoever he wanted to, of delivering all the freight for the Sacramento Northern and Western Pacific Railroads. Yeah, right out in Marysville. And he arranged to turn that whole thing over to Doyle. Now he was the big boss over his own trucking company and making pretty good money. Now, in the meantime, I comes home from this mission. And No, I'm getting this backwards here. I'd already married Pearl, haven't I? I've already passed that up.
No, he's come home
I
from your
skipped
mission.
that, didn't I?
No, you haven't got there yet.
Huh?
You come home from your mission.
Wait a minute, I'm getting things mixed up here a little bit. Better turn it off. Well, when I finally came home from, by the time that I left the mission field, I had already been transferred over to Arkansas, Fort Smith, Arkansas. Well, not Fort Smith, right in it, but right near there. Paris, Arkansas was one of the last place I worked in before I come home. And when I finally come home, we didn't have any money. The circumstances were such that Doyle, he wasn't giving me any money, and I didn't have any money, and I didn't have any family, and no father to go to help me out with anything. And boy, I'll tell you, I was slated to go right into the service. I was supposed to report here in Sacramento on the 18th. Can't remember whether it was May or June. I think it was May the 18th.
Mm-hmm.